Welcome to CSS Selectors tutorial. In this tutorial, we'll be covering the usage of CSS selectors. CSS selectors allow you to select and manipulate HTML elements in order to apply CSS styles. So CSS selectors actually select HTML elements based on either the element name, ID, or any attribute, etc. So in order to demonstrate, let's go with an element selector first. So in this example, you could actually see three element selectors h1, h2, and p defined within the style element. So the h1 element selector corresponds to the h1 HTML element here, and the h2 CSS selector corresponds to the h2 element here, and the p CSS selector corresponds to the both paragraph elements present in the body tag here. So let's try to quickly reload this web page and see how it gets affected in the browser. Okay. So now you could see the main heading, the subheading, which correspond to H1 and H2 respectively, and the two paragraph elements, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, are applied with the styles which are defined within the CSS declaration blocks. So this is how an element selector gets applied to HTML elements based on the element name. In order to apply the selection based on ID, we could actually use ID selector. So ID selector actually uses the ID attribute of an HTML element in order to select a specific element. As ID should be unique within a web page, you could actually use ID selector if you want to select an unique element. In order to use ID selector, you need to start with a hash followed with the ID of the corresponding HTML element. So here in this example, we could actually pick a paragraph element, say paragraph 1, and let's reload the web page and see how this gets affected. Okay, so now you could see it's just the paragraph 1 which is actually picking up the style, but not the paragraph 2. So this is actually applying here just to the first paragraph element within this HTML page. So this is how you could actually distinguish between different HTML elements using an ID selector. You could also use a different type of CSS selector, which is a class selector. So this class selector actually selects elements based on the specific class attribute. In order to apply a specific class selector, you need to start with a dot and follow with the class name. So in this example, we actually have two HTML elements, say the paragraph element and the div element having class 2. So let's take class 2 here. So now this would actually correspond to the class selector, and let's try to reload this web page. Okay, so now you could see both the elements, the paragraph 2 and the div 1, which are actually having the common class value, which is as class 2, is actually being applied with the CSS style, text align center, and color blue. So now you could see it's not the paragraph 1, but it's paragraph 2 and div 1, which are actually applied with the CSS styles. In order to further refine, you could also apply the styles to filtering at a different level. Say like you wanted to select just the second paragraph element with a class 2 value. So this can be used like a combination to actually select specific paragraph elements, which are actually further filtered based on the class attribute. So in this example, it would be p.class2. So this should actually modify the value just corresponding to the second paragraph element, that too with which is actually having the class value as class 2. So let's try to reload this web page again. Okay. So now you could see it's just the paragraph 2, but not the paragraph 1, which is actually picking up the CSS style. If you wanted to optimize the CSS code, which is actually having same CSS declarations, we could also group multiple CSS selectors. So here in this example, for demonstration's sake, we actually use the same styles across all the elements. So you could actually group this just with a separator using comma and remove the remaining CSS declaration blocks and try to reload the web page. Okay, so now you could see the main heading which corresponds to H1 and the subheading which corresponds to H2, and both the paragraph elements, paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, which corresponds to paragraph elements, the P selector. So all these four elements are actually applied with the same CSS declarations. So with this, we actually covered the usage of CSS selectors. Thanks for watching the video.